Well, you know, this program is about human rights, and it's about the persecution of the Baha'is in Iran. And in that country, the actual formal practice of the Baha'i faith was banned. And informally, the Baha'is have tried to maintain their spiritual lives. And assisting them were 7 volunteers. So there's no priesthood, there's no ministry, there's no clergy in the Baha'i faith. These 7 people were asked to try to take care of the affairs of the Baha'is in lieu of formal Baha'i institutions. These 7 people were rounded up in the middle of the night about 3 years ago and put in prison. And they were charged with various crimes, trumped up charges like spying for the state of Israel or spreading corruption on earth and various things. Well, we have with us the brother of one of those 7 Baha'is that is still in prison to this day. Iraj Kamalabadi was born into a Baha'i family in northern Iran. After obtaining his high school education in 1976, he moved to the United States to pursue his college studies. He currently works in Southern California for the URS Corporation as a transportation manager. And he is the elder brother of Mrs. Farhad Kamalabadi, one of the 7 Baha'i leaders who was summarily arrested in the spring of 2008, along with 6 of her colleagues. And these 7 Baha'i leaders are currently being held in Gohardasht prison in Iran solely for their religious beliefs. And here to give us a personal perspective of prison life for his sister and these other Baha'i leaders in Iran, please welcome Iraj Kamalabadi.
Good evening, friends. Thank you so much for coming to this important event here to voice our solidarity for grave human rights violations in Iran. I am the brother of one of the 7 members of the ad hoc committee in Iran administering to the Baha'is of the Baha'i community of Iran. And I had prepared a presentation that takes about 20 minutes, but I understand that the schedule is tight. So forgive me for going through some of these slides kind of quickly. We need to understand, why are the Baha'is persecuted in Iran? And we need to look at the history. And I'm going to go through all these very quickly. Back in the 1940s, when the Baha'i faith started, the country of Iran was going through a state of decadence with widespread corruption within the government, widespread corruption within the Islamic clergy, and widespread usage of opium. So in those dark days, when the Baha'i faith came, it brought new hope to initially the people of Iran that were deprived of many very basic rights, and then ultimately to the rest of the world, but in particular in Iran. And now let's compare that to Iran today, where, I mean, in the past, some 20,000 Baha'is were killed in early days. And you can imagine in a country at that time with 7 or 8 million population, how many Baha'is there were, so that 20,000 of them were killed. Imagine. So what an appealing message it was that was brought by Baha'u'llah that had all these people turning to it. Now, today in Iran, the first 3 symptoms are still there: state of decadence, corruption within the government and clergy. But to that, now we've become more modernized. There's widespread of drug addiction. According to the UN report, Iran has the highest usage of drug in the whole country as far as people that are addicted or using various forms of drugs, the highest. And to that has been added widespread prostitution, some 635% increase in the past 20 to 30 years. Now, there is public unrest because of the disputed June 12th presidential election, and then the outcome of that has been gross violation of human rights, with people having peaceful demonstrations within different cities in Iran. Now, at the beginning of the Islamic Republic, a special commission from the UN, Reynold Galindo Paul, through him, a secret blueprint from the government came to light that the government has plans of systematically getting rid of the Baha'i community in Iran. And following that, there were so many different plots by the government, a government that is supposed to be vouchsafing the well-being of its citizens, is itself plotting to annihilate a peaceful religious group that have nothing but the wish of serving their country and serving their fellow human being, and obedient and serving to their government. Now, the government has gone through a systematic destruction of Baha'i cemeteries, of anti-Baha'i slogans all over the country. Death to the Baha'is, and this and that. Anti-Baha'i notices thrown at people's homes and businesses. Businesses burned. So many anti-Baha'i propaganda in national newspapers between 2001 and 2007, based on this report. You can see the rise of government propaganda, government-sponsored propaganda through newspapers, and so many anti-Baha'i articles in the national newspapers. They have not even left the pure innocent children alone. The government has published a storybook for children and provides it free of charge to all the children of the world, of Iran, let's say, in which they ridicule the central figures of the Baha'i faith, in this case, the Bab, the herald, the forerunner of the Baha'i faith. And you can, if you remember some years back, a Danish caricaturist drew the face of Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad, and that gave such an uproar, raised such an uproar in the whole Islamic world, especially in Iran, when they passed sentences to kill this caricaturist. And they even went ahead to the extent that they changed the name of the Danish pastry to Mohammedan pastry. Imagine how ridiculous that could be. And Baha'i youth are not able to go to universities to get higher education. Now here they are, 7 members of the Baha'i community who very well knew that by accepting this charge of attending to the needs, to the very basic administrative needs of the Baha'i community, their lives could be in danger. But nevertheless, these brave 7 people accepted to serve the Baha'i community, the 300,000 Baha'i community in Iran. And I would like to go through each one of them in that same order that you see in this picture. Mr. T's Pham, 37 years old, optometrist. Mr. Tawakkoli, 59 years old, social worker. Mr. Khanjani, the oldest member, 77 years old, a factory owner. Mr. Naimi, 49 years old, an industrialist. Mr. Razai, 53 years old, an agricultural engineer. My sister, Iraj Kamalabadi, 48 years old, a psychologist. And last but not least, Mrs. Sabet, 57 years old, a school principal. These are all servants of their fellow citizens and community, and have served with selfless. And they have been, in the past 3 years, in prison because of their service and because they are Baha'is. They are the national leaders of the Baha'i community of Iran. Now, these are some of the charges that were brought against them. I would like to concentrate on just one or two. Espionage for Israel. Just because the Baha'i World Centers, Baha'i World Headquarters in Israel, they brand them with spies for Israel. The last one, spreading corruption on earth. Not just Iran, the whole earth. Wow, what a power they have. They can spread corruption on earth, even in the US. So of course the government has to be afraid of them. So these are the charges that they've been tried for and finally convicted and put to 20 years in prison. Now, Shirin Ebadi, the law offices of Shirin Ebadi, who was the 2003 Nobel Peace Prize laureate, accepted to represent them. So after she announced that the government threatened her life, they confiscated her Nobel Peace Medal. They put in prison her colleague, Mr. Sultani, who was representing the 7 Baha'is. Then they put her sister in jail. Then they raided her office. And then she went on to say that she has examined the case of the Baha'is and there is no single shred of evidence against them. So she demanded that if justice is served, they all need to be released immediately. But instead, the government went through the trials of show trials, basically, closed session. No independent observers were allowed to go in. No family members were allowed to go in. After a series of trials, they were sentenced to 20 years in prison. Now, when they were in Evin prison for 3 years, waiting for their sentences, waiting for their trials, we all know the famous American, Iranian, Japanese journalist was in prison in Iran. And she happened to be in the same cell as the 2 ladies, my sister and Mahvash. And I had the opportunity to meet her face to face and talk to her about some of her personal accounts. Now, she has written a book, Between Two Worlds, where she says that her life was so positively touched by these 2 selfless Baha'i ladies that they were a source of emotional support and inspiration to them. And she has dedicated the whole chapter, chapter 17, to what she calls these 2 angels in prison. Now, after they received their sentence, they were transferred to this new prison in Karaj, just outside of Tehran, Gohardash prison, which is famous for housing the dangerous murderers and drug dealers and thieves, and not just political prisoners, with inhumane and deplorable conditions, as many people have witnessed. And so there are cellmates with drug dealers, with murderers, and with thieves. Now, they appealed, their attorney appealed on their behalf, and they orally reduced the sentence to 10 years. But just recently, only 2 weeks ago, the chief of the judiciary of Iran overthrew that and withheld the original 20 years sentence. So they are now officially charged and serving a 20-year sentence. Now, within all this time, they have not gone. And they have not been, I would like to wait a few minutes here and give you some stories of what they have done. These are not regular prisoners. For the past 7 years that they have been housed in this women ward with 170 of most dangerous criminals, they have used their love for humanity. They have used their knowledge of psychology and education to educate and give counseling to these deprived people. They all have developed psychological problems and have given them such a genuine love. And what they say, the two Baha'i ladies, that we love these people from the bottom of our heart. We don't see any evil in them. We see nothing but the goodness and nobility of human creation in them. And therefore we love them. from the bottom of our hearts, and we serve them. So what has happened, 170 people that are the most dangerous criminals, they have been changed. They have been so inspired that now, instead of beating each other to death, when a fight arises, other people go and try to mediate between them, and then they apologize to each other and say that they're sorry, and they go about their way, their peaceful way. One lady who was very famous for being so radical and very dangerous and erupting very, very easily, that everyone was afraid of and was shunning, trying to stay away from. One early morning, when the prisoners who wear slippers, no shoes are allowed, go to the backyard to get a fresh air. One day my sister was going down to the backyard, and she noticed that there was some rain and that had mixed with some garbage and some sewage that were outside of the building, and it had created a puddle. She was wondering how she could go through this puddle without getting her feet dirty. As she was thinking how to go over this puddle, she noticed that this lady, who everyone is afraid of and doesn't talk to, ran from the corner of the backyard towards her. She removed her own slippers, threw her slippers in the muddy water for my sister to walk over so she wouldn't get her feet dirty. Imagine the level of transformation. Now, on the third floor, the government announced, the prison officials announced that no prisoners are allowed to talk to these Baha'is. Otherwise, they will be considered as guilty and they will be dealt with accordingly. Next thing you know, 170 inmates rushing to these two Baha'is and say how much we love you, how much we appreciate you, how much you have changed our life for good. We will support you, we will be with you. Total disregard for the officials. Now the officials had no choice but take them to solitary confinement and accusing them of teaching the Baha'i faith. Well, first of all, what's wrong with that? Everyone is supposed to teach their faith and share their beautiful message. But in Iran, it's a crime for Baha'is to do that. So they said, we haven't done that. They said, no, you have. They said, what have we done? They said, well, you have smiled at them, you have helped them, you've lent them your cooking oil, you've let them use your calling card, so you've taught them. So we have to take you to a more dangerous, secluded area. So now they've moved them to second floor, where they are there with criminals that have not only have committed crimes outside of the prison, but even inside. So next thing we know, people from third floor, they walk in groups of 8 to 10 downstairs as they're being beaten up, and they don't hit back. They come down, they meet with these two Baha'i ladies, and they say how much they love them and miss them. They go back. Next thing you know, next group comes, like a chain reaction. And among them, a huge lady that always picks up fights, and another lady who people are afraid of. She comes, and when she's being beaten by the prison officials and by the guards, she doesn't hit back. She comes to them with black and bruise and said, see, for the very first time in my life, I was beaten up by people weaker than me, and I did not hit back because I wanted to act like you. I wanted to be like you. Total innocent. And then she went back. And people, right across from her, there's a lady who's murderer, who has killed 2 people, not only has committed crimes outside, but killed 2 people inside the prison. She has become friends with them. She calls them Auntie Fariba and Auntie Mahvash. And when she knew that they are fasting, she was up early in the morning, and she noticed that these 2 Baha'i ladies are fasting. She said, what are you doing? She said, we're fasting. Why? Because we're Baha'is. So next thing you know, she has tremendous respect for them. And she told other prisoners that these are Baha'is. So next thing you know, the other prisoners on the second floor bring food for them, for these 2 Baha'is to break fast with, and say, please accept this food from us. We heard that you're fasting. And please pray for our soul. These are dangerous criminals. Their lives have been transformed. So therefore, cultural cleansing is not only limited to Iran, but many countries of the world have experienced this. And I would like to share this quotation with you from a pastor, a Lutheran pastor, Martin Niemöller, which is very moving. In Germany, they first came for the gypsies, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a gypsy. Then they came for the Bolsheviks, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Bolshevik. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Catholics. I didn't speak up then because I was a Protestant. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak up. So in closing, the House and the Senate have a new resolution that they introduced to the floor on March 1st. House Resolution 134, Senate Resolution 80. Please contact your representatives, your senators, with letters and ask them to either co-sponsor this or vote positively so that it would pass. The message is to condemn the government of Iran for its state-sponsored persecution of its Baha'i minority and its continued violation of international covenants on human rights. So in brief, the Baha'is in Iran are being persecuted solely because they are Baha'is. And please, do not be indifferent. Do not be silent, like Martin Niemöller. Thank you.
Iraj has dozens of stories to share about his sister, and maybe after the program, if he's not too tired, you could talk to him more. He wanted to share much more with you, but we asked him to compress his presentation, and I appreciate what he has offered to us, and he did it so well. Thank you, Iraj, very much. We have another Baha'i artist who also drove here last night from Southern California. His name is Walter Heath, and the Baha'is across the country have been enjoying his music for about 4 decades, and he's such a charming gentleman. Please welcome Mr. Walter Heath.
For all the work that people are doing in service to mankind, for the benefit of bringing peace and unity to the world. There's a prayer for protection for those efforts. Talk that was given, and we see that this problems in the world with bigotry and hatred, many of those feelings are based in misguided religious beliefs and thoughts and superstitions. And the unity of all religions is our key for people to learn tolerance and understanding and appreciation and love for one another. We all live in the year of Sunday. So many things are in store for us. Oh, what a gift to be born in Sundays. Beautiful light way down here in the dust. People return to the tree of oneness. Oh, won't you hurry? His presence is there. Down on our knees in the darkness of Sunday, we'll find the answers to all of our prayers. And then every day will be Sunday for you and me. How I pray, I God made a pact with Abraham to never leave man alone. So Abraham gathered his family and brought his people home. And then came Moses, gave the world a push. He climbed up on a mountain high. He got the 10 Commandments from a burning bush and put together his first tribe. And then came Jesus through Jerusalem, riding on the shoulder of a dove. The dove upon his shoulder said he was the one to teach us how to love. Muhammad came out of the desert sun, stayed out there just as long as he could. The Maker gave him water from the river of life, and then he gave us nationhood. And then time passed, soon the dark clouds came and covered up Muhammad's son. But the young Bob, way down in Persia land, he came to tell us of the promised one. Lo, the nightingale of paradise singeth upon the twigs of the tree of eternity. With holy
are living here of Sunday. So many things are in store for us. Oh, what a gift to be born in Sundays. Beautiful life way down here in the dust.
And I loved his comments too, and the lyrics to the music, it kind of said it all. So I really appreciate that. Thank you, Walter.